But sometimes in a rare situation, certainly you can utilize the basilic vein in the forearm, but definitely not in the arm. Fistula, if you have to see the anatomical perspective, this is the lateral most side. It is a good size vein. It is a constant vein in the arm, and the antecubital. Now, for example, here you have cut the cephalic vein, but cephalic vein, if it is too lateral, then it can be cut here, and the antecubital fossa. There is no valve here. It's just the junction, and antecubital vein also can be joined with the artery, and therefore the blood will go from here to here and then go to the cephalic vein. So that fact can be utilized. So this we have already discussed. It can be covered under the brachioradialis muscle, and that has to be taken care of. This is how the system works, and that is why the medial side is not preferred. Sometimes the veins they go too medially, and therefore when patient is lying down, this is not a proper side. This is a proper side on the lateral side. So that is what it is. In case if you have to utilize this vein, then that has to be transposed to the on the lateral side, and then it can be utilized. So that is what is the important thing. Also, you can see here that basilic vein actually gets covered, goes into the deep fascia and goes under the muscles. You can see here that basilic vein is quite deep, and therefore even if it is superficial here, and if you do anastomosis here, it is of no use, because majority of the vein which is dilated is actually underneath the fascia, underneath the muscle. So if you have to utilize that whole vein has to become the superficial, that can be transposed. So that is in short about the vascular anatomy. So over to you, Dr. Deepu, and then we can have the next talk. Thank you very much.
Shall I start, Dr. Sabnis?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Why should we take interest in AV fistula? Because it is lifeline of a patient of CKD. Why should a patient have AV fistula? Because the National Kidney Foundation and KDOQI guidelines state that every patient who has CKD deserves an AV fistula. That is a clear-cut guideline, because AV fistula, a native AV fistula, gives a longest complication-free patency rates for vascular access in dialysis. There are standard text, standard literature, standard guidelines. Anyone who is keenly interested in vascular access should read these 3 articles on vascular access for hemodialysis. So, planning and timing is everything in a fistula. The standard strategy as of now is fistula first, line last. That is, in an ideal world, there should be no need for central venous catheters. We should plan well ahead in time, make a fistula, and even the first dialysis in a CKD patient should start with a fistula. For this, preserving venous real estate is extremely important. A fistula should be created at least 6 months before the anticipated dialysis, created well in advance to allow not only for maturation, but should it fail, then further interventions may also be done in that time, so that ideally first dialysis by AV fistula. A patient should be referred for AV fistula surgery when his or her GFR falls below 30 ml per minute. That is standard National Kidney Foundation KDOQI guidelines. It should be allowed to mature for at least 1 month and preferably 3 to 4 months before cannulation. Central venous catheters should never be put until actually they are needed, and non-dominant upper limb distal sites for AV fistula are almost always preferred. If they are not available, then you may move up on the extremity. This is very important in any dialysis transplant centers. What we actually do is, as soon as CKD is diagnosed, we give one of these bands to be worn by the patient after selection of the arm for AV fistula construction. And whenever he goes to the lab, he wears these bands, and the lab technician or ICU technician or staff of the hospital knows that these veins are never to be pricked except by the urologist or nephrologist or dialysis technicians. So we make every effort to train the staff to preserve the venous real estate. In spite of these efforts, because of repeated ICU admissions, because of postponing the AV fistula, some patients ultimately get a subclavian catheter. Could not be done. So the end result of these subclavian catheters, they get a subclavian vein thrombosis. There is lot of collateral circulation, and when we construct AV fistula in these arms, this is the result: the swollen upper limb because of AV fistula combined with subclavian vein thrombosis. So how do you evaluate a patient before AV fistula construction? The ultimate target when we construct an AV fistula is to achieve a superficial vein of 6 millimeters in diameter, flow of more than 300 ml per minute, which can accommodate 2 needles, and there should be minimum of adverse events in the lifespan of that AV fistula. The requirements of a good AV fistula are good arterial supply, adequate vein, and patent central vein, that is outflow. These three components of AV fistula are extremely important for success of AV fistula. We have to note adverse factors in the history of a patient. History of venous cannulation and punctures or central venous catheters is an adverse factor. On that side, we should avoid doing an AV fistula. Age and diabetes mellitus are against maturation, as well as they are risk factors for ultimate failure because of the quality of vessels. We make an every effort to palpate all the arterial pulses, the quality of whether they are palpable or not, and the quality of vessels. Whether the veins are suitable or not, we tie a tourniquet in the arm, inflate the tourniquet to 90 or 100 millimeters of mercury, let it be there for 5 minutes, let the vein get inflated, and then map the veins and artery, as I will show you in subsequent slides. If vessels are difficult to assess clinically, then Doppler is essential. And if upper limb vessels are not available for fistula construction, then lower limb vascular evaluation should be done. So this is a bad case for AV fistula anywhere. Multiple central venous catheters, still on dialysis through right subclavian catheter, multiple subclavian catheters, IGV catheters on left side as well as right side. So this is a bad case for constructing AV fistula in upper limb, probably high risk for upper limb engorgement. This is a very fortunate fellow. When I get a reference for AV fistula construction, I ensure that two things are available: a marker pen in my pocket and a tourniquet in the vault. After inflating the tourniquet, I distend the vein, mark all the veins, mark 2 arteries, and then decide my incision, decide my approach, and decide my site for AV fistula. There are certain patient variables which affect the outcome of vascular access. Age and diabetes, because of the quality of vessels, have a negative influence of fistula maturation, and they also increase the risk of eventual failures. Once upon a time, it was thought that peripherally inserted central catheters will not cause central vein occlusion, but it is not so. It is proven beyond doubt that even elbow vein catheters can lead to central vein thrombosis. It is very controversial whether female patients have a less than optimum success for AV fistula. It is controversial. Certainly, if there have been previous central venous catheters in upper limb, then a Doppler to demonstrate whether there is deep vein thrombosis or not is essential. Preoperatively, adequate hydration to avoid hypotension to prevent early vascular thrombosis is essential before AV fistula construction. Well, there are antiplatelet agents by dime a dozen, and there is heparin, but still the jury is out on that. There is heterogeneity of evidence which says that we should give these agents or not. I personally feel that we should not use it, and I don't use it for AV fistula construction. Arm exercises pre-operatively have a very doubtful value, although post-operative arm exercise have been shown to have enhanced the success of AV fistula. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ajay. Wonderful demonstration of preoperative preparation and timing of the fistula. This is very important, very important. One should know, definitely one should know when to start the fistula and what is the measures you should take for the successful AV fistula creation. So now I invite again Professor Ajay Ashal to demonstrate your video on radiocephalic and brachiocephalic fistula.
Thank you, Professor Hussain. So my screen is seen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
My screen is seen or not?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Screen is okay. Carry on, sir.
Okay. So, in order to do AV fistula, you should have an excellent armamentarium. We should have a good vascular set, and I cannot overemphasize the importance of magnification and illumination. These go a long way in enhancing the success of AV fistula. These are very small points, but critically important. Proper positioning of the patient and exposure of the part. The surgeon should be absolutely comfortable in a sitting position while doing AV fistula. The incision should be marked appropriately. This is an incision between the cephalic vein and radial artery on the forearm, and this is a horizontal incision 2 finger breadths below the elbow, where we take incision for a brachiocephalic AV fistula, and this is an excellent dressing. These are small but crucially important points which one should ensure before undertaking AV fistula surgery. I am briefly demonstrating a right radial artery to cephalic vein end to side AV fistula. This is the incision. 3 to 4 centimeter of cephalic vein is exposed. We make every effort not to hold the venous wall with the forceps, but to use the perivascular tissue to hold and mobilize the vessel. All the tributaries of the cephalic vein in this exposure are ligated, and cephalic vein is moved to the radial artery. The radial artery is exposed by incising the deep fascia. The radial artery lies lateral to the flexor carpi radialis tendon. This is the radial artery. One point of technique I want to highlight is never to mobilize the radial artery completely. Just mobilize it enough to apply 2 vascular clamps. Ligate and cut few side branches of the radial artery. Now this is the radial artery. I do not lift it up completely. I mobilize it enough only to apply 2 clamps. This is the cephalic vein, which is distally ligated, cut, and a hydrodistension of this vein is done for 2 things. It increases the size for anastomosis, and it gives you confirmation whether this vein is patent or not. A arteriotomy on the roof of radial artery is done. The length of this radial arteriotomy is 1 to 1.5 centimeter in length, not more than that. These 2 clamps are applied proximally and distally to ensure a bloodless field for anastomosis, and the cephalic vein is spatulated towards the floor, that is 6 o'clock position. And we see how the vein wants to lie, how the vein wants to go. First stitch, distal angle of radial artery, inside out. Now I change the needle, then inside out on the cephalic vein. then continuing with the same needle outside in on radial artery, and then continuous suturing till the angle of cephalic vein spatulation is reached. At no point during this process I am holding the intima of any vessels. These two appropriately applied clamps ensure a bloodless field. I usually do not give heparin even before start. This intracath is put just to ensure that I do not take a bite of the opposite wall of the cephalic vein. This is angle of the cephalic vein, but this is not the angle of the radial artery. I'll tell you that in the next slide why I am doing this. So angle of the radial artery is being taken now outside in under magnification and illumination so that we avoid taking bite of the opposite wall. Just one or two sutures here, then we start from the distal end again. The suture material I am using is 70 Prolene double armed. So I start from this end again. This is the distal end. Make every effort not to hold the intima or either of the cephalic vein or radial artery, both. Every bite is under vision. This is a simple mop in which I have created a hole, so it isolates the field and my Prolene doesn't get entangled in any of the instruments lying side by or in the clamps. That is the advantage of applying this mop. Even the last bite is under vision, and even for the last bite or any bite, I don't hold the intima. And these are vascular instruments. The clamp is released. Even though there is some bleeding, a compression is enough to control that bleeding. See the lie of this vein. It is without any tortuosity, without any turn, without any twist, and blood is seen spurting through the cephalic vein, and radial artery was pulsating nicely. So that was the demonstration of end to side radiocephalic anastomosis. I wish to share few points of techniques with all of you. The vein should come to the artery straight without any twist or turn like this. Oblong lie on the arteriotomy of the venotomy. It should not be a zigzag course. So what we should do is, we should not insist on angle upon angle or toe upon toe and heel upon heel. We should make it oblong. We should avoid these kind of twist and turn, because at these points of turns there is turbulent flow and it gives rise to neointimal hyperplasia and ultimately stenosis. So now let us go to the left brachial artery cephalic vein end to side fistula. This is a perforator vein. This is a perforator vein. This is the cephalic vein, and this is medial cubital vein ultimately going to the basilic vein in that direction. This is the brachial artery under the cover of that tendon, which the tendon has been, the aponeurosis has been incised, and there is a vena committant to that brachial artery, which I will tie and cut it off. So this is a perforator vein, good enough for my anastomosis. The brachial artery is exposed and control of cranial and caudal ends are taken. The perforator vein is controlled and transected. A clamp is applied to the brachial artery. This is how the vein wants to lie. So we will spatulate the vein at 6 o'clock position, and we will open the artery at 12 o'clock position. Mind you, the length of incision of brachial artery should not be more than 75% of its diameter. 75% of the diameter. So length of the incision on the brachial artery should not be more than the 75% of the diameter of the brachial artery. So this perforator vein has been spatulated. Now I begin my anastomosis just cranial to the spatulation, because I want to make this angle sit at a particular point at the brachial artery. This is a clamp from cardiac surgery department. It is very nice and very delicate clamp. It doesn't damage the vein. This is, I am using parachute technique. I am not bringing the vein to the brachial artery right away, but just taking few bites under direct vision, making a point not to entangle the suture into one another, but at the same time keeping the vessels away from each other. This is parachute technique. These are like strings of parachute. With the help of this flushing and pulling the proline, I make the perforator vein now sit on the brachial artery. See, there are no slacks. All the sutures have been tightened. The proline has been pulled up. Now I will start the another edge of the anastomosis. At no point I am holding the intima of any vessel. Every bite is under direct vision. We were lucky to get this perforator vein here. Now we'll start from the cranial end of the arteriotomy. All bites under vision without crushing the intima. This periarterial tissue is of immense use in holding the vessel. It saves you from holding the intima. So the anastomosis is completed. First, I will release this clamp on the perforator vein. It's a very tiny and delicate vascular clamp. Then this perforator vein will drain the brachial artery blood flow into the cephalic vein, as well as through this vein into the basilic vein and through this vein towards the forearm. But I don't want this situation. So before closing the wound, what I shall do is I should ensure that I tie a ligature here so that blood doesn't get diverted to the forearm, causing its engorgement. I would tie off this vein so that blood doesn't go into the basilic vein, because even if the anastomosis is successful, I don't want at present the blood to go to the basilic vein. I want cephalic vein to develop for dialysis access. So I would remove the clamp now, and you will see nicely dilated perforator vein and blood spurting. And before closing off, ensure that you ligate this vein going to the forearm, this vein going to the basilic system, because there is no use of basilic system today because cephalic vein is nice and patent, and I don't want forearm to get engorged. So no extra bites, no extra sutures, and this is nice flow. And the cephalic vein is nicely distended, and this is the transverse incision, just 1 or 2 finger beds below the elbow crease. This was the cephalic vein and this was the basilic vein. Nice thrill I am palpating. So after successful vascular anastomosis, how do you define success of an AV fistula? Good intra and persistent post-op thrill, normal distal arterial pulsations so that the distal limb is perfused well, maturation of the AV fistula to the extent that it is a 6 mm vein providing 300 ml per minute of flow, accommodate 2 needles, and minimum requirement of interventions for complications like thrombosis, stenosis, central venous occlusive disease, aneurysms, or infections. No limb ischemia, no venous engorgement, and long-term patency. This is a big list of factors which should be there for success. If all these factors are there, then I call it a successful AV fistula. There are certain adjuncts to good techniques. The venous real estate should be preserved, adequate perioperative hydration, prophylactic antibiotics, antiplatelet agents and heparin, they have a very doubtful value, loco-regional anesthesia. Of course, post-op arm exercises have been proven to be definitely beneficial, and patient should be trained in palpating the thrill, and if he feels that thrill is absent, he should immediately report to the hospital. The key to success. AV fistula is not a minor surgery, even though done under local anesthesia. For a CKD patient, it is like a family heirloom, lifeline, or a real estate. I cannot overemphasize the importance of magnification and illumination, good vascular instruments, and training. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Ajay. Wonderful demonstration of brachiocephalic and radiocephalic fistula, and also the tips and tricks for successful technique for creating the AV fistula, and also the key points of success and so many things. Thank you very, very much. I think the young urologist and our resident will be the future urologist. They will be benefited more and more by your demonstration, because I think this is a great scope of learning, and I am very much happy to see the enthusiasm of the participant. Around 203 participant is now here, and so there are so many questions already. Professor Sabnis sir give the answers by chatting. I observe it, and some question to Professor Ajay Ashal we will discuss this later on.
Professor,
So,
please allow me to make one comment.
Now or later?
Now.
Please.
Since you have raised this issue, I urge all the residents, all the young urologists to undergo training for making an AV fistula or all kinds of vascular access, because gradually I am observing that this turf is being overtaken by not only nephrologists, plastic surgeons, vascular surgeons, cardiac surgeons. Everyone is encroaching upon this AV fistula turf. If we don't reclaim our territory, it will be lost to us forever. This is my sincere urge to all the young urologists. Thank you.
One thing I add with you, Professor Ajay, as the urologist in this subcontinent, in Bangladesh, also in India, the urologists are the pioneer transplant surgeon in this subcontinent. So transplant surgeons, as urologists are the transplant surgeons, so urologists should take the responsibility of the AV fistula.
Yes.
And in our country, you will be happy to know the government is take decision to create more and more dialysis center even in the periphery. So if urologists take the responsibility, that will be a bread and butter for the urologist in future.
Yes, yes, sir.
So thank you, Ajay. I will come you later on case discussion. Now I again invite Professor Ravindra Sabnis sir to talk on how to prevent failure, how the fistula fails, and what can I do to enhance the success. Sir, please, Professor Ravindra Sabnis sir, please.
Thank you very much. I think Ajay, Dr. Ajay has very nicely demonstrated that how the fistula can be done how the success can be enhanced, and what are the technical things which has to be observed when you are doing the fistula surgery. And as you also rightly pointed out, that the AV fistula, the number is going to increase, and from the resident's point of view, it is extremely important that they are well trained in this fistula surgery. Is very, very important. And those who wish to make a career in transplant, it is the bread and butter for them to do good fistula, because good fistula will make sure that nephrologist will be very happy with you. If you don't do fistula properly, they will find somebody else. Unless and until you give a proper good result, then they are not going to be happy with you. And if they are happy with you, I'm sure all their transplants are going to come to you. So that's a very, very important thing. The other thing is that if you do a fistula properly, then when you are actually doing the transplantation, you will have far more advantages, because you are already used to doing the vascular anastomosis, you are already used to doing end to side anastomosis, you are already used to do a nice proper dissection and handling the delicate veins. The renal artery, renal veins are much, much bigger than what you are handling the for the fistula. So fistula, actually doing a nice fistula is a prerequisite and is the base for a successful transplantation. So that is very important. So I'm going to take a step forward, and I'm going to discuss about, he told you about the how the fistula can be made and how it is to be, how the success can be assessed. So I'm going to tell you that why fistula fails. And obviously, once you know the reasons why it fails, you can enhance the success rate. And the later part of it, I'm going to tell you that in spite of doing all these things, there are occasions where the fistula will fail. You do radial fistula, it is fail. You do brachial fistula, it fails. And then you are stuck as to what next to do, because it is not the end of the story. If you just to do a radial and a brachial fistula, there are so many aspects of it. And briefly, I'm going to cover the other aspects, that if fistula fails, what next? So this is what I'm going to cover in next about 20 minutes. So why fistula fails basically is there are many reasons why fistula fails. There are certain preoperative reasons, there are certain intraoperative reasons, there are certain postoperative reasons, and there are certain delayed problems which can occur, and therefore the fistula can fail. So let us see one by one what are these reasons. The pre-op reasons can be is the bad selection of case. Now what do you mean by bad selection of case? Because it is very important, as Dr. Ajay pointed out, that it cannot be taken casually. You need to check the patient preoperatively, put the tourniquet, see the proper examination, see whether the veins are proper or not. So if you select a vein which is too thin, and if you don't examine properly and just casually see, yes, it is all right, and then intraoperatively you find that the vein is too thin, then that is not going to get matured, that is not going to get dilated. It is very difficult to do technical anastomosis, and that can be the first step of failure, and that is not acceptable. So examination is very important. Measuring or understanding the caliber of the vein. That's why I said that what should be the caliber of the vein, what should be the caliber after tourniquet in the vascular anatomy, and that's a very important thing. Again, when you are examining, see if there are any recent punctures of the same vein or not, especially at the near the AV fistula site. Now, these are the preoperative reasons why the fistula can fail. If you have multiple punctures exactly at the site of the vein, then obviously there is thrombophlebitis, and when you do anastomosis of this such vein, obviously there are chances of a thrombosis which can form, and then the fistula can fail. And therefore, it is important that these things are to be checked preoperatively. Sometimes the wrong selection of the case, because usually in the long-standing diabetes, when they get CKD or ESRD because of the diabetes, there is usually the microangiopathies, and the peripheral arteries usually are not sufficient enough to get the appropriate flow. And therefore, in the long-standing diabetes, if the pulsations are not that much, if they are feeble, and if you select the radial fistula just because the vein side is good, that is not sufficient at all. So that is what is the selection of a bad case. This patient, if there is a feeble radial artery, has to go for the higher or a brachial fistula. Some patients have coagulopathy, some people have thrombotic tendency, that has to be checked. There are certain set of investigations which are available for the hypercoagulation stage. And if you don't understand that, then the fistulas can fail. You do one side, it fails. You do second side, it fails. You do higher, it fails. Not because of your technical problem, but because you have not given the appropriate attention to the hypercoagulation stage, and that has to be checked up. So these can be some of the reasons why, preoperative reasons of failure of this. Now, Ajay said that the patient ideally has to be done about 5 to 6 months before anticipated starting of the dialysis. Now, this is very, very important, that improper timing also can be a reason for the failure. Now, what do you mean by improper timing? Most of the time, although Dr. Ajay highly highlighted that what is the appropriate timing for the fistula, but most of our patients are not like that. Almost 80% of our patients are the acute fistula formation, meaning thereby they come in the sudden acute condition, they undergo dialysis by the double lumen catheter, and then they come up for the fistula formation. So in acute stage of starting hemodialysis, unless and until patient is stabilized, it is not appropriate to do fistula. He has undergone first dialysis just yesterday, and today you are taking a fistula, not proper at all. Because when you are initiating a dialysis in the acute stage, then it takes time. It takes few days for patient to achieve the dry bed. It takes a few sessions of dialysis for patient to get stabilized, because there could be fluctuation of the blood pressure, there can be hypotension, and if that happens in the next dialysis episode, and you have done the fistula on the previous day, obviously that fistula is going to fail. So improper timing is the reason for failure. Sometimes the patient has other problems like fever, diarrhea, vomiting, especially in the acute stage, they get a lot of vomiting. Sometimes they don't tolerate medications, they have diarrhea, and they get hypotension. That's not a proper timing for the fistula. Let all these problems they settle down, because any hypotension will cause the decrease in the flow. Decrease in the flow in the vein will immediately result into thrombosis. Then the third thing is that it's too early as the elective procedure. I just said that it is about 5 to 6 months, but sometimes in the over enthusiasm, you do fistula and then it is not being used for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And then there is a possibility that such fistula is likely to fail because it is not being used. And there are long-term consequences of the fistula. And as time goes by, there are certain percentage of fistulas bound to fail. So too early formation of an elective fistula is also improper timing, which can result into a failure. And therefore you do fistula, it is working properly. But 2 years down the line, when patient is coming up for dialysis, that time the fistula is failed. And again, you are going to start all over everything again. Then improper timing, because if you don't dialyze the patient properly just before surgery, then again it is not proper, because after you do fistula, at least 24 to 48 hours, it is better to do not do dialysis, simply because during dialysis they have to do a lot of heparin. That can start the bleeding, that can cause hematoma, that can cause the around the anastomosis bleeding, and that can compress and cause failure of the fistula formation. So a proper, good, nice dialysis, so that pre or post operatively, at least 24 hours to 48 hours, there is no need of dialysis. That is how the timing has to be properly done. Sometimes we have seen patients are being referred by nephrologists. The nephrologists sometimes are in too much of a hurry. Everything they want to hurry up. And they send patient for fistula formation, but they can't even lie down for 1 or 2 hours. Obviously, in the middle of the patient becomes breathless because he is not able to lie down properly for 2 hours. And then you are halfway through, and then it's a major problem. The patient becomes breathless, he gets edema, he gets dyspnea, and that is what results into a suboptimal this and then failure of the surgery. So these are the reasons of pre-op reasons. Now let's come to the intra-op problems. Intra-op reasons, what can be the causes for the failure? Now, the first important thing is that too much of a dissection. Now, Ajay, when he described, he very nicely and he highlighted and he made a point. I was also listening to that. Not too much of a dissection of the artery and the vein. Now, that is very important. Now, if you do dissection too much, which is not required, then the artery can go into spasm. Too much of a dissection of the vein and too much of fine dissection of the adventitia of the vein can eventually cause the damage and eventually can result into a post-operative thrombus formation or a long-term stenosis. So that is very important. Inadequate dissection of the artery also is very important, that you should not do too much of a dissection. You should not do inadequate dissection, because if you don't dissect it properly, just little bit of a dissection, then the anastomosis can come under tension. And especially if you are doing the brachial artery, brachial AV fistula, and if the vein is too lateral, and if you don't dissect it properly, then there can be a very acute king. It can be a right angle course of the brachial of the cephalic vein, and that can cause the problem. Inadequate mobilization of vein leading to acute kink is a very important factor, which can happen in the radial artery as well as in the higher artery or in the any other site. Not ligating nearby big tributary or a vein leading to a steal of the blood. Ajay pointed out that if you are doing the vein, especially he showed demonstrated when he was showing this, that if there is a tributary going to the deep system, ligate it, not required, because not only that it will steal the blood, but even if it is not stealing the blood, the unnecessary high pressure system, high pressure venous flow into the deep system will cause venous hypertension, and that is actually not required. So any nearby tributary can be ligated, it is not necessary, and that can cause the failure of the fistula. Too much dissection of the adventitia is very important. I have seen previously that some people keep doing so much of finer dissection of the artery and a vein that they become too thin, and these are the patients who can eventually land up with the aneurysm formation or a structure formation. And therefore, excessive removal of the adventitia of the vein as well as of the artery is not required. It can form into the aneurysm formation. So this you can see here that too much of a dissection can cause juxta-anastomotic stricture, unnecessary problem, and that can cause a nice working fistula eventually will fail. Now this you can see that there's a big tributary which is actually going into the deep system. Now this is not required. This was not identified, and that can cause improper maturation. Fistula is working, but you don't get a proper flow, you don't get a proper maturation. And the simplest treatment is just to ligate this fistula, ligate this tributary, and the whole vein will start draining well, and then the proper maturation and proper flow can be obtained during the dialysis. So that is the reason of dissection. Now, when you are doing anastomosis, there are some technical problems which can come, and there can be technical reasons for failure. So reasons for failure of intraop can be reasons of dissection, and there can be resection reasons during anastomosis. Now, what are those reasons during anastomosis? First and foremost, that improper clamp on the artery. Quite often, you take the clamps which are not of a good quality. The clamp should be such that when they occlude the artery, they should not damage the intima. So that is the sign of a good clamp. If you don't take a good clamp and if you apply them, then they can cause the damage to the intima, and that can cause the intimal lacerations, and then that can cause the thrombosis. Similarly, due to the intimal damage can be more, especially if it is a very much atherosclerotic artery, calcified artery, then that calcification can break and that can cause into the thrombus formation. So you have to palpate how the artery is, where the relatively supple area is, and there you put the clamp. Some people don't even put a clamp, you just put a sling. Just take one more curve of the sling, and then you just gently give pressure that is sufficient enough for you to occlude the blood supply, and then do the anastomosis. Too tight clamp is not proper, that can cause into the failure. Then anastomosic problem, the suture material is not proper. You should use a very fine monofilament sutures. The ideal is 60 or 70 Prolene. And if you don't use too much of a too fine sutures, if it is too big, it can cause problem. Then too small anastomosis. Now it all depends on what is the pulsation, what is the size of the artery, because you need to have an adequate flow for the fistula, for the vein to get arterialized. If you don't do a proper anastomosis, usually it is about 9 millimeter to 1 centimeter length of the anastomosis is required. But if you make small anastomosis, sufficient flow is not there, which can cause failure. Too tight sutures. Now, if you do anastomosis and if you make it too tight, then it can cause pursing effect, and that can cause the relative obstruction to the flow, leading to a thrombosis. Anastomosis, multiple sutures to stop small bleeders. As Dr. Ajay pointed out, that when you release the clamp, there could be some bleeders. From the anastomosis, you are not going to take too much of a tight anastomosis. So some oozers or some bleeding is bound to be there. Don't give too much of a pressure. Just put a dry gauze paste, a very gentle pressure. Most of the bleeders will stop. But in enthusiasm, if you start taking sutures, because these are all puncture, needle punctures which keep on bleeding. If you take too many sutures, then it will compromise your length of anastomosis, and that can cause failure. Sometimes you don't realize that you are actually taking the posterior wall and the anastomosis, and that can cause the failure. So failure to check the patency of the vein and the back bleeding. Now that's a very, very important thing, that the moment you open the vein, you must flush the vein and see if there is any proximal obstruction or not. A free flow of saline into the proximal vein, or passing of a 5 or 6 number feeding tube which is going through and through up to the central vein, free flow of the blood and a back bleeding ensures that there is a good patency of a vein. Now, if you don't have that patency, if the flow is not proper, which means that there is some proximal subclavian or somewhere there is a stenosis, whatever good anastomosis which you do here eventually is going to fail. And therefore, when you are dissecting and when you are doing anastomosis, these are all aspects which you have to tell, and these are the aspects which will actually enhance your success rate. So if you pay attention to all these factors and rectify them, that indirectly is going to enhance your success rate. Now, after dissection, after anastomosis, important thing is closure. Now, as you know that the vein is superficial, the deep artery which is there, you have brought it to the superficial, and these anastomosis is actually under the skin, in the subacute plane, and therefore you have to identify before closure that if it is lying in the natural position or not, if there are any kinking or not, because when you are doing anastomosis, you might be under impression that everything is fine, but once you release the clamp, when it takes its natural position, you will find that sometimes they can be kinking, there can be some tributary which is actually causing a acute kinking. So that has to be rectified. Then too tight skin closure or subacute closure is going to cause problem. Don't do too much of a tight multiple layers closure. It is not required. What you need is just a simple without any tension closure. So deep anastomosis should not be under too much of a pressure, especially if there is not much space. Then the too tight dressing in the post-operative period, don't give too much of a tight dressing. If you do tight dressing, you are actually occluding the veins, because veins are not arterialized immediately. Too much of a pressure can cause failure, and that can be the reasons of failure. In the immediate post-op, what are the problems and what are the reasons for failure? There could be bleeding resulting into the hematoma, which can compress the anastomosis and vein. Anticoagulants, there is, as Ajay also pointed out, there are two schools of thought. Some people give, some people do not give. We as a routine do not give any anticoagulants. So in fact, our experience is a little bit different. If you give too much of anticoagulation, there could be bleeding around the anastomosis, and that can cause problem. Kinking of a draining vein, folding of the hands. Sometimes if you do the fistula in the forearm, and if the hand is constantly pressed into the folded, it can cause pressure. Sleeping habits. In fact, there is one paper presentation or publication that sleeping habits should decide as to which arm to be selected. Some people have the habit of sleeping, putting the head on the arm, and if that is so, then that can cause a pressure on the vein, and that can result into the failure. Post-operative hypertension has to be avoided. If there is any hypertension due to any reason, it will cause failure. Immediate dialysis has to be avoided. We already discussed that. There are certain reasons for delayed failure of the fistula. Why fistula fails? That early puncture of the vein. Unless and until you allow 1 to 1.5 months for the maturation of the vein, it is not proper to use those veins, because the veins are still very thin wall. The pressure inside the vein is high, and if you puncture it, these punctures will not, the bleeding will not stop, and that will cause extravasation of blood, that will cause hematoma, that will cause compression of the vein and resulting into the failure. Post dialysis, too much compression of a vein is the reason. Hypotension, hypergranulation of the intima. Now, this can be a problem of the delayed failure over a period of years, because the vein is not meant for the high pressure. The intima undergoes the hypertrophy, and that hypertrophy sometimes can cause the blockage. Non-use of fistula for a long time. This we have seen many times that it fails. Successful transplant, sometimes we have seen that often it fails automatically. Development of a stenosis in the vein segment or higher up in the subclavian due to any reason can cause into failure. And development of any complication, aneurysm, pseudoaneurysm, fungal infection, burst, anastomosis, repeated puncture, same side, thinning of the vein, thinning of the skin, redness of the skin, it will cause all failure. Sometimes there are reasons for the usage failure. What do you mean by usage failure? Fistula is working properly, but during dialysis, they are not able to use that fistula. So even if you have done an excellent job, from the dialysis point of view, from the nephrologist point of view, it is a failure. So what are those failures? Fistula is working, but it can't be used for dialysis. That is because you have done anastomosis, the deep vein, the basilic system. And we have seen so many patients coming to us that fistula, there is a good thrill, but it is of no use because it is done by the brachiobasilic anastomosis. Fistula is not maturing. There is a thrill, but it is not maturing. It is not that good thrill. That is because the arterial flow is less. You are not selected a proper artery which has got a nice proper flow, or there could be a proximal stenosis. Inadequate flow during dialysis because of the inadequate arterial flow, still by the deep vein. We have seen that. And a very small segment for in and out. As you know, during dialysis, they have to have a proper length of the vein for drawing the blood and putting the blood back into the system. If this segment is not adequate enough in the length, then there is recirculation and there is an improper dialysis. And nephrologists will never be happy with that fistula. And therefore, when you do fistula, even though you do an excellent job, if the vein segment available is not a good, is adequate length, it is a technical, it is of no use. It's a usage failure, and therefore this is a wrong selection of a vein or a segment, and that has to be avoided. So any complication, as we saw, will result into the failure. And next, I will just show you few videos. If radial fistula fails, what next? Either the same arm can be utilized or the opposite arm can be utilized. So radial fistula is the most ideal fistula. See the vein, radial artery, radial fistula is the always of a choice. If opposite vein is suitable, opposite artery is suitable, that fistula can be done. If that is not proper, then same side high radial or the brachial can be done, and all depends on the reasons for the failure. Brachial artery, brachial AVF artery is bigger. So if previous failure is due to non-maturation, poor flow, brachial is a good site for doing fistula. So if radial failed, next is brachial. Cephalic vein is bigger in diameter, and brachial AVF matures quite early and arterializes quite early. But the disadvantage of brachial fistula is that brachial artery and cephalic vein, they are sometimes too far off. There can be tension on the anastomosis. Length of the arterial is relatively less, not like radial AVF. Incidence of aneurysm is higher because it's a high pressure system. Chances of venous hypertension, distal edema is more. Median nerve can cause sometimes a problem because if it comes into the anastomosis and if damage it, it can have a problem. Sometimes because it's a high proximal fistula, the workload or the preload on the heart can increase, and then in a compromised cardiac problem, this can be a problem. And most important, if they develop any problem, like if there is a fistula or if there is an aneurysm in the radial artery, you can just ligate the radial artery, nothing is going to happen. But that cannot be done in the brachial artery. You have to repair the brachial artery, and that really becomes a very challenging thing. The other option is the forearm transposition. If there is a big nice forearm vein, it can be transposed and joined to the radial artery. Effective vein segment can be a very big, and a good length can be obtained. I will show you this video in a very short while, that sometimes you don't have the proper vein. Artery is good, and you see that only this much segment of the vein is there, and there is no dilatation of a vein, which means that cephalic vein is not good. But you can see here, this is a nice good vein on the medial side, but that is not the site for the anastomosis or for the puncture, and therefore that needs to be transposed. So that is called as forearm transposition. So this whole vein can be dissected. It can be brought on the lateral side, and that can be done. This is how it can be done. This is a very simple thing. Once you understand the principle of it, there is nothing much. Multiple incisions, and the whole length of the forearm vein can be dissected right from down to up, because that is the site where you want to bring it into the lateral side. So this is how it can be done. All the tributaries are to be ligated, and now you can see that the whole segment is getting completely freed up. Now this is coming again higher up, and I will just fast forward this video, because you just have to understand the technique and the principles of it. Once you ligate all these tributaries at this, now you can see that the whole vein segment is getting freed up. There are small incisions so that you avoid all one long big incision, and this can be dissected right up to this place, and the transposition can be done. Now you can see here that it is adequately transpositioned, adequate amount of the length is properly dissected. And now you see that this whole vein is now completely brought out. It's a nice, good length of vein, which is dissected right from the elbow, because that is going into the basilic system. But you have the full forearm, which can be made under the superficial tunnel, and that can be transposed, or that can be anastomosed to the radial artery. So now you can see that there is a nice good length of vein which was actually going on the medial side, which was of no use. This can be a subacute tunnel can be created from this, and a small anastomosis can be done here. So this is in short about the principle of the vein, and so this can be done. Rarely ulnar to basilic fistula can also be done if the radial fistula fails. Basilic vein in the forearm is not all that deep, and if it is prominent, suitable, can be done, but it is very, very rare. Now, most important thing, if your radial and brachial fails, is the basilic vein transposition. And I want to spend a few minutes on this, because this is a very, very important operation. Once you understand the principles, it's very, very easy to do it. And I'm sure all the urologists can easily do this surgery. The basilic vein, what are the facts? The basilic vein is consistent in size. Basilic vein is of a good diameter. It is generally patent and quite good. It belongs to the deep system. It can be brought to the subacute plane. Anastomosis can be done to the brachial artery. Generally, even if there are multiple punctures, this basilic vein is spared from all these problems, and therefore the benefit is taken in that. This is a small clipping of the basilic transposition. Again, the principles remain same. This is where I have shown the long incision basilic vein. The same can be done with the multiple incisions. We nowadays do with the multiple incisions, like I showed you for the forearm transposition. But the principle again is same, that you dissect out the whole basilic vein, ligate all the tributaries here, and right from the elbow to the axillary vein. As you know that basilic vein eventually continues as the basilic vein. You can see here that the whole vein is dissected, patency is being checked, any tributaries, any leakage points are checked. You see that there is a nice good flow, which means that everything is patent. And once that is done, you create a subcutaneous tunnel. Now this whole basilic vein can be brought into subcutaneous tunnel. Make sure that there is no kinking. Sometimes when you make this tunnel, there can be acute kinking here. So that should not be avoided. There should be a nice proper length of the vein should go from this. And that is how it is brought into the subcutaneous tunnel on the lateral side. Sometimes, see now, there is no kinking that can be shown from here. Sometimes in the over enthusiasm, it can take acute turn and then subcutaneous. Then again, it is not going to be a proper vein because it is not going to have the proper flow. So once you make the suture line, this is how the subcutaneous tunnel will come. Again, bring this vein down deep into the deep system near the brachial artery here. Now the anastomosis to the brachial artery done. Again, make sure that there is no acute kinking here. Anastomosis is done like what Dr. Ajay has demonstrated. I will not waste time into that. Now once the anastomosis is complete, once the clamps are released, now you can see that there is a nice proper good vein. Immediate there is a good thrill, good pulsation. You can see that the whole vein has become very prominent here. You can see actual pulsations from here. Nice big good diameter basilic vein. You can see that it is pulsating, very nice flow. And if you see here, the flow has already started. Thrill can be felt right up to the arm here. And you can actually see that it is the whole vein is pulsating so nicely. So that is the benefit of the basilic transposition. Now, if there are no veins, you can use the autologous veins. That is the saphenous vein can be dissected, and synthetic grafts can be used. This is the saphenous vein interposition from the radial to the basilic, which is also quite good, less expensive, good long segment. But there are two scars which are there. Sometimes the grafts can be used. Graft can be used at various straight graft from the radial artery to basilic vein. It can be curved graft. You can see that can be ring-like graft. It can be non-ring graft. And ring grafts are better. I will go a little bit in a hurry. But these are the different sites which can be used in the upper limb. You can have the curved graft. You can have from the brachial artery to the basilic vein. You can have straight from the radial artery to these two are very, very common sites for the upper limb graft. But there are various grafts which can be used in the lower limb also, from the femoral artery to the femoral vein. Sometimes it can be used from the femoral artery to the saphenous vein. That can be used. So these grafts can be used. Sometimes, very rarely, this is just a last video for demonstration. You can utilize, sometimes quite often you will get the subclavian stenosis. Now, if you have that sort of a thing, no fistula can work. And this is the graft which can be anastomosed from the brachial artery, go into the subcutaneous tunnel and to the internal jugular vein. If the internal jugular vein is patent, that long graft can be placed. And you see here that the graft can be put into the jugular vein to the brachial artery. And that is the benefit of the graft. Now, as you know, graft, the benefit is that it can mature. There is nothing like maturation. It can be utilized very early. But the problem is that the patency rate of the graft is much less as compared to the autologous material. AV fistulas, whichever fistula you base, there is a natural tendency of the failure. 60 to 70% is the general patency rate in the publication at the end of 2 years. And as the years go by, some fistula will keep on failing. And therefore, just to summarize, AV fistula is the most important surgery for the ESRD patient. Nice working fistula is a big boon to the patient, to the nephrologist. For CKD patients, veins are very precious state, should be preserved at all the cost. When you do AV fistula, utmost care should be taken for the success of the surgery, and there should be next plan should be there in your mind. So thank you very much, Dr. Deepu. Back to you. This is what about wanted to tell about the why fistula fails, how success can be enhanced, and if the fistula fails, what next can be done. Thank you very much.
It is an excellent master talk. My heartiest thanks and gratitude to you. I hope the participant and viewer immensely benefited by your master talk. And I said earlier before starting this talk, you are the master of all in urology. Really, you proved it. And my deepest, heartiest congrats and thanks to you. And along with Professor Ajay, Ajay did the wonderful talk. Now I invite Professor Ajay to start your case-based discussion. And in this regard, I invite our panel of experts, Professor Rajiv Tipi, USI Secretary, Honorary Secretary, Professor A.K.M. Khurshidul Alam, Chairman, BS Homomy Urology, Professor Shafiqul Alam Chaudhary, Professor and Vice Principal, Dhaka Medical College, Professor Monoarul Haq Shamim, Head Chittagong Medical College, and Professor Muhammad Hossain, Associate Professor Urology, BSMU, and Professor Kazi Rafiqul Abedin. And along with, I invite Professor Ravindra Sabnis sir, please join this panel of experts for discussion. And I should mention one thing, Professor Madhu Agarwal is the President of SARC Urology Association. He joined in our meeting. Sir, thank you very much for joining with us. And I see he gave a comment. So thank you very much, sir, for joining with us. So Professor Ajay, please start your case-based discussion because it is now 4:35 in Bangladesh time. So after that, we have some case question answer session. So we'll take some question. After that, the today's webinar will be concluded. Our president.
So, are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
So, again, good afternoon, everyone. Let us straight away go to our cases.
Yeah, Professor Ajay, one correction here. That is Dr. Kazi Rafiqul Abedin and A.K.M. Khurshidul Alam. That is not Kazi Khurshidul Alam. Is A.K.M. Khurshidul Alam, and another name is Kazi Rafiqul Abedin. Okay, don't worry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
So this is a 25-year male who has a swollen left upper limb. The salient points in history are multiple central venous catheters bilaterally over 1.5 years, including one permacath through right IJV. Left brachiocephalic AV fistula side to side, after which the limb got swollen after a few weeks. Excoriation of skin and cellulitis leading to incision and drainage leading to skin grafting. At this point, this patient came to us demanding treatment for swollen, painful left upper limb now, with the condition that if you get rid of this swollen limb, I will get transplant at your center. So Professor Sabnis, this is a very nice enticement. He says, get rid of this swollen limb, I'll get transplant at your center. So over to you. So left swollen upper limb. This is hard non-pitting edema. Multiple catheter entry sites, right subclavian catheter, swollen forearm limb, a ghastly looking skin graft which has got infected also. Now this is a swollen left upper limb secondary to one radiocephalic AV fistula which never worked and one left brachiocephalic side to side AV fistula which is still showing frill, but it cannot be used for dialysis.
Yeah, I think,
So,
Ajay, this is a very common problem which keeps coming. And the reason for all this fistula not working, all the swelling is because of the proximal stenosis. Multiple catheters which are being kept for quite a long time will result into the subclavian stenosis. And now nephrologists are very fond of putting a double lumen catheter, and they keep it for quite a long time. And that results into a stenosis. And once that stenosis forms, no fistula, whichever site you use, it is not going to work. It will fail, and there will be inadequate flow. So,
so your
to treat
suspicion
that,
is so your suspicion is proximal central venous occlusive disease, right?
yes.
Okay.
So,
What
treat
investigation would you like?
that. We do the venography, see where exactly the stenosis is, and if you dilate that stenosis, then the edema and other things will subside. Apart from, of course, the elevation and crib bandage and all those things are to be done. But the correction of the stenos segment will relieve the edema, and that I think is the treatment for this person.
So we did not do a venography. After Doppler showed patent left fistula, arterialization of veins. We did a CT angiography, which
Okay.
shows huge veins. This is posterior view, cephalic vein, basilic vein, side to side AV fistula, and this is the brachial artery. This is the posterior oblique view. This is the side to side AV fistula, basilic vein, cephalic vein, and brachial artery.
Okay.
Of note is the fact that the whole length of subclavian vein is stenosed. 6.5 centimeter is the length. So can any interventional procedure overcome this barrier or hurdle?
That will have to be checked. If that is not so, of course, that will have to be seen by the interventional radiologist, whether they can put with the wire and then dilate it. If that is not possible, then they will have to, you'll have to do a bypass, give this drainage to internal jugular vein, which is present, putting some bypass interposition, either autologous or the synthetic material from the axillary vein to the internal jugular vein.
What about ligating these fistulous veins?
Because even if the fistula is ligated, eventually with this subclavian stenosis, how the drainage is going to work out?
There
Because
are nice
now what
correlates.
patient wants is the relief of the edema, relief of all the hard pitting edema, which is all because of the venous hypertension. And even if you ligate this fistula, yes, the circulation or the load on the venous system will be much less, but that is not going to rectify the long subclavian vein stenosis. If you open up that, then the fistula also will work well. The drainage also will proper this. And in the arterialized vein, if you give the alternative channel, it can rectify.
So Dr. Sabnis, he was seen by a team of expert cardiologists and interventional radiologists, and they attempted, but they could not negotiate anything. So they referred it back to us, and now we have decided that they cannot do anything. I suggested following things. Subclavian vein angioplasty, out of question. Embolization of fistula veins, not possible. Covered stent in brachial artery, not possible. So open surgery was the only option left with us. So we explored him through a vertical incision across the elbow. The most important piece of equipment during this exploration was a tourniquet. It needed to be inflated to 300 millimeters of mercury to control the bleeding.
Right.
And it was hard, tough edema, and everywhere you touch, there was water seeping out, as if I am doing an underwater surgery. So this was the brachial artery. This was a side-to-side fistula. This was a basilic vein. This was the cephalic vein. There was some kind of thrombus here, and these were the distal venous limbs. We tied these veins, but in an attempt to tie this vein, there was a rent near the anastomosis site, which led to torrential bleeding. We had to inflate the tourniquet to 300 millimeters to control the bleeding, and ultimately we could control the bleeding. These are the tide of veins. This is the opening in the brachial artery. We had to put in a PTFE patch, and after this patch was put, this is nice pulsation in the brachial artery. This patch has worked. This is the basilic vein. This is the vein towards cephalic. And at the end of 48 hours, you compare the preoperative picture and postoperative picture, there was significant reduction in the edema. So this open surgery was very difficult, but it worked very well. The only problem which we felt, which we observed, was after this surgery, the primary closure of wound was impossible. So we had to do a secondary closure 72 hours later.
Right.
So I present similar case, side to side brachiocephalic AV fistula. Few weeks later, the limb was swollen. And here our nephrologist, who is also an interventional nephrologist, said he can negotiate something across the stenosis. So this is the stenosed subclavian vein segment. See it again. This is the stenosed subclavian vein segment.
Right.
They negotiated a guide wire across. They could dilate it with a balloon. They chose not to put in a stent because the results with or without stent are equally bad. And this is the final shootout, patent. And happily, this is the end result. Significant reduction in the edema after venous dilatation.
Yes.
So stent was not put because one, stent is expensive and the results are equally bad or equally good. So in a case of swollen left upper limb, the endovascular therapy is not durable. It has low rates of technical failure, but multiple additional interventions are the rule, and long-term patency rate is not very good.
Right.
So Professor Hussain, hello, Professor Sabnis, when do you suspect central venous occlusive disease in a given case of AV fistula?
The central venous system problem is that there are multiple times you can suspect it. One is that if the fistula which you have done technically, if it is not maturing as per your expectation, there is a problem of the proximal stenosis. On table, if the flow is not proper, that is a problem. On table, if the flow is not going properly, that's suspicious of central stenosis. Nicely working fistula, eventually, if it is gradually deteriorating and is delayed closure, delayed failure, again, you have to suspect that. And most important is that persistent edema and the venous hypertension, signs of venous hypertension in the limb, in the form of edema, congestion, distal discoloration. These are the signs where you actually suspect that there could be some proximal stenosis. And what you have shown here is a very representative cases where the proximal stenosis has become really a great problem. And the only measure is that interventional radiologists dilate these veins, do the balloon dilatation, and that is how the things have to be taken care of.
Okay, so in central venous occlusive disease, for short segment stenosis, PTA may work, but for a long segment stenosis, surgery, although with its difficulty, is the best long-term option.
Yeah.
This is another case, a pulsatile 4 by 3 centimeter swelling at the puncture site. Doppler shows it to be a true aneurysm. What to Professor Khurshidul Alam, may I request you to answer this case? Hello. Dr.
Hello.
Hussain.
You can unmute them.
Hello.
I have not muted him. Okay, Dr. Sabnis.
Uh,
Professor Khurshid sir, unmute you and
Yeah.
give the answer, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead. We
Yes,
can
yes,
hear
we are hearing you,
Yeah.
sir. Khurshid sir.
Yes. Yes. There is no skin ulceration, and whether it is a there is area for cannulation, we can proceed with this. But
proceed with what?
there is
This is a true aneurysm. What should you do
Yeah.
now?
if there is a distal proximal fistula is persistent, and there is no inadequate blood supply to the distal arm, then we can observe it, as there is no skin thinning and skin ulceration is there over the aneurysm.
What we had
Otherwise-
observed was the fistula was working. There was no ischemia to the distal limb, but there was redness, hotness, and this pulsatile swelling, which on each follow-up kept on increasing in size. Therefore, we did not observe. We operated upon him. We could identify the channel entering the aneurysm. We could excise in toto and also salvage the fistula. So, in a true aneurysm, which is expanding in size and which is getting inflamed, like redness of skin, hotness of skin, there is no point in waiting, which is what we feel. So we explored him and excised the true aneurysm and also saved the AV fistula. Okay. In order to save some time, I straight away go to the next case. This is an engorged hand after end to side left radiocephalic AV fistula, as had been pointed by Professor Sabnis in his presentation. Even though the fistula was end to side, there were multiple veins entering into the cephalic vein from the hand, which were not tied at the time of surgery, but later on they ended up causing engorgement of the limb. Professor Sabnis, what would you do now?
Yeah, so if the fistula is working well, and
Yes.
this is a very common problem, the answer is to explore and then ligate those veins which are actually draining. They are not required to be draining at all. And because of the high pressure, the valves get damaged, and that is how the whole venous hypertension gets developed. So ligation of those tributaries
So,
is the answer.
we salvaged the fistula and just ligated these veins and see the result. At the end of 7 to 2 hours, her skin is nicely wrinkled. So this was salvage of fistula after ligating the additional veins which were never wanted. So this is a Professor Khurshidul Alam. Hello. This was a side-to-side radiocephalic AV fistula done at another center, which resulted in engorgement of the hand. What would you do now? Professor Alam?
So explore the hand,
Yes.
ligate distal.
So
Distal
you
the
want-
radiolateral.
So ligation of distal limb of vein, ligation of distal limb of artery, excision of
Yeah.
fistula. What?
Excision of fistula. If fistula is functioning, no excision of fistula. Ligation
Yes,
of distal
correct.
artery and vein.
So this fistula was working. We were using it for dialysis. So we were successful in ligation of distal venous limb, and fistula as well as at the hand was salvaged. This is a very
Okay.
interesting case. 18-year boy who underwent kidney transplant and came back with recurrent episodes of congestive cardiac failure. And cardiologist said that this is because of your end to side brachiocephalic AV fistula. So, and there was nice varicosities. There was congestive heart failure in spite of successful kidney transplant. And when we compress this fistula, his heart rate would drop down by at least 25 beats per minute. So, Professor Mohammad Hussain, are you online?
Yes.
So, Professor Hussain.
Mohammad Hussain. Mohammad Hussain.
Yes.
Mohammad Hussain is there?
Okay, Professor Sabnis, answer this question, please.
Yeah, I think this is a classic case where you need to, once the transplant is successful, there is no need for this fistula. and the best option is just to ligate that vein, that draining vein, and it's a very simple, a very quick, a very short surgery. It will take care of everything. Sometimes this also is required to be done for the cosmetic reasons. Quite often, the veins are remain dilated, transplant is successful, and they don't want that dilated thrill and this to be present, and you just have to ligate that vein. That's it.
So we took proximal and distal control, separated artery and vein, underrun the vein by 6-0-proline in 2 layers, and used the remaining patch of vein to repair the artery. Successful. Thank you very much, and I wish Eid Mubarak to all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much, Professor Ajay. Thank you, Professor Ravindra Sabni sir, for a wonderful talk and for a wonderful deliberation and demonstration. Our viewer and participants are immensely benefited, and I personally immensely benefited. I want to know one question, Professor Sabni sir.
Yes.
What should be the ideal anesthesia for AV fistula?
Right. So I'll tell you something which is a very different thing that we used to do always under local anesthesia, and we still do quite a bit of cases under local anesthesia, especially the radial artery and the brachial fistula. But we had the live surgery demonstration at a workshop some time back, and the vascular surgeon from UK had come, and he said that we do all these fistulas under the brachial or the axillary block, the regional block. And we were a bit surprised as to why you need to have this. It's such a simple thing. But actually what we have realized that if you give a block, then the veins gets dilated, and that enhances the success rate. In fact, during that live surgery itself, we had kept one patient for the brachial AVI because the cephalic vein was not visible. It was not prominent, even by putting a tourniquet or other thing. And moment the block was given and the hand was examined, the cephalic vein distally was so prominent and so dilated that actually that patient ended up in doing the wrist fistula. So fistula can be done under the local anesthesia, brachial or the radial both.
Hello.
But I feel in a difficult case or in a compromise, some little the block can be preferred. It can be the brachial block, which now our people very routinely give. That anesthesia is quite preferable. And the in the brachial block, you can do extensive surgery also, like graft, putting a graft or basilic transposition and other things. All these surgeries can be done with the under the brachial block.
Sir, another question.
Yes.
Another question, sir. What is the ratio of the length of arteriotomy to length of the venotomy regarding radiocephalic
So,
fistula? Professor Ajay.
I will answer the question, sir.
Yes.
For radiocephalic AV fistula, the length of the arteriotomy is 1 to 1.5 centimeter, and the venotomy is just a little bit more than the arteriotomy, because I want the vein to sit like a hood onto the artery, not flat like a cap. I want the vein to sit like a hood onto the arteriotomy, which makes for good flow. Don't make the vein sit like flat on the artery. So venotomy is just a little more than the arteriotomy.
Professor Sabni sir, as you mentioned, and we get
the length you will take.
Pardon, sir?
For the brachial fistula, how much arteriotomy you will do?
75% of its diameter. That is the length. That is the literature quoted length of the incision over the brachial artery for brachiocephalic AV fistula.
Right. So arteriotomy size length is more in the radial, in the wrist, and it is more. It is less in the brachial. If you take a too long the site on the brachial artery, there will be too much of blood which will get, and then you will get the Steele syndrome in the distal limb.
Yes, sir.
Professor Sabni sir, another
Yes.
thing you mentioned, and as we also read many journals and literature, the fistula has a natural tendency to fail. So
Yes.
usually fistula, even in very good functioning fistula, suddenly fistula fails. So
Yes.
what is your, though you give a master talk on this, but I want to hear in a nutshell one or two points that is very important for prevention of the sudden failure of the fistula.
Yes. So what happens is that, especially in the long term, say for example, the fistula is working for 2, 3, 4 years, and then it fails. There are few reasons why it fails. That, as I said, in the natural tendency, because the veins are not used to have the very high pressure in the system, so intima undergoes the hypertrophy, and that hypertrophy sometimes can actually gradually become so much that it over a period of time occludes the passage of a blood in the vein, and therefore there is a relative stenosis, and that causes the failure of the fistula. That is one. Secondly, all the other reasons which are there for the prevention of hypertension and other things. Suddenly, a fistula which is working for 4 years, and patient actually gets the episode of gastroenteritis or something like that, and suddenly you realize that fistula actually has stopped functioning. Many times this happens that patient is on dialysis for 5 years. He comes up for transplant. Transplant is actually going on well, develop some hypertension, intraoperatively there's some problem, and then post-op you realize that there is a fistula actually has stopped working. Patient undergoes surgery for some other purpose, there is little bit of a hemodynamic instability, and then fistula stops functioning. So in the long term, these are the reasons for why the fistula can fail. Ajay, you want to add anything to that? Please add.
No, sir, very well said.
Sir, Sabni sir, we are
Yes.
at the end of this webinar. So finally, I want to hear from you a few points for today's participant.
Yes. So what I would suggest, or I would like to really congratulate you for thinking of this particular topic. And I know that you were attending that BOE program. Subsequently, also we did a lot of programs in our hospital about this workshop, just to ensure, or just to highlight to the people that this is the surgery which should remain to urologists. And Ajay, during his introduction, also said that there are a lot of people who are actually waiting for this surgery to be taken up by them. And we have seen many times in Mumbai, there are a lot of vascular surgeons who are doing it. But urologists actually are it is for them, it is a natural, because you are always in conversation with the nephrologist. You know a lot of problems which are common with nephrologists and urologists. And for the junior people who are logging in and watching this program, I will give a message, or I will give advice to them, that many times the AV fistula surgery is there in the list, operating list. It is generally done at the end of the day. You take PCNL, RIRS, and all other TURP, HOLAP, and all those things. And at the end, when everybody is tired, when the sister is in a hurry to go, when the or senior people, they run away, and the fistula is given to the junior most person, he transfers to the junior person, and that is how the fistula is landed up with the junior most person in the team. And somehow he is also in a hurry just to finish the fistula somehow. Some fistulas work in the process, some fistula don't work. But I think that is the biggest disservice which we are doing to the CKD patients. It should not be done like that. The person should be interested in doing it. Senior people must advise the junior people that priority should be given to these patients. And if you, this is our experience, that if you give a priority to the fistula surgery, if you do a nice proper fistula which keeps on working very well, nephrologists, I am sure, will be extremely happy with you. They will refer all other patients to you because you have developed rapport with them, you have understood their problem, and that is how you will get more and more work, and that is how they will refer patients to you for transplantation and various other things. So fistula, doing a nice proper fistula not only is a good benefit to the patient, to you, but to everybody in the team also. So my advice to everyone is that spare little time, give little importance to this. It is as important as PCNL and RIRS. And if you, this is a very technically very simple thing. If you understand few things, I'm sure consistently you will be able to give a good result. And my advice is spare some time and do this surgery and try to give a nice good result to them. Thank you. Once again,
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
thank for inviting us. I always, for Bangladesh Urology program, it is like homecoming for me. It is like our own state chapter meeting. So I always like to
Thank
see all this, my good friends from Bangladesh. Particularly to you, I'm extremely thankful to you. We have been closely associated with lots of programs. So thank you for inviting me and getting me associated with this program.
So I thank all the
Thank you
members
very,
of
very much. Thank you, Sabnis sir. Thank you for your valuable advice and talk. And you are really our mentor, and we follow your path. And Professor Ajay, please say something to participant, please.
I thank all the members of BAUS, Professor Sabnis, Professor Hussain, for inviting me to be here and share my thoughts and experience, which is very humble with everyone. Thank you very much. Eid Mubarak.
Thank you very much. Now I invite Professor Rajiv TP, Secretary USI. Professor Rajiv TP.
Actually, my video is not there. I don't know, but I'm
Why?
listening to you. Anyway, it was a wonderful deliberation here. Even I also learned from this many things. And especially Dr. Ajay Oswald presented a marvelous presentation. Thankful to him. He has presented wonderful cases even of the complications post AV fistula. I need not say anything more about Sabnis sir because he is an expert in all fields. And as of all you know, any questions, he has a definite straightforward answer. That is a simplicity and simple answer, which is very straightforward. So I need not make any comments about him. But it has been a wonderful thing, a small topic, but it is a very important topic as it has been highlighted by all speakers. This platform, it is going away from the urologists, which is not only in Bangladesh, in India, mostly it is taken up by certain general surgeons, plastic surgeons, and vascular surgeons. Once upon a time, it was done only by urologists because as Sabnis sir has highlighted, most of these fistula cases are kept at the fag end of the OT, somewhere around 3:30 when everyone is tired, no lost interest. So they shunt it to the junior most chair, because of which many of the failures and complications occur. Actually, those we as urologists, especially the young urologists, should take up this because transplantation program, we should bring it back, as Dr. Ajay Oswald has already highlighted, to our ambit. And this is the first step towards a transplantation because once you expertise in arterial venous AV fistula, it is very helpful during the transplantation as well. This is my humble request and suggestion and advice to the young budding urologist that you should not leave it to anyone, you should take it up, and this will come a very handy in your practice in the long term. Thank you very much, the executive of the BAUS, especially my friend Bipo, for giving me an opportunity to be with us. As Sabnis sir has always said, you are a part of the Urological Society of India.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Rajiv. Really, you are a very good friend of mine and also Bangladesh Association of Urological Surgeons. And the friendship which was built between USI and BAUS, it will remain continue and definitely will be more and more collaborative in future. And in this regards, I always need your help and the help of the USI and especially Professor Sabnis sir. And Professor Madhu Agarwal sir, are you still with us? President SARC Association? I think he left. So now I invite our Chairman Scientific Committee, Professor Jamanul Islam Bhuya, Before that, I again go to our panel of experts. Professor A.K.M. Khurshidul Alam, on behalf of the all panel of experts, sir, please say something of today's program. Professor A.K.M. Khurshidul Alam.
Thanks to the speaker and Bangladesh Association of Urological Surgeons for arranging such a nice webinar regarding vascular access. It is immensely benefited to our all residents and even us also. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Anybody from the panel of experts do want to say anything, something?
Professor Hossain, please ask the delegates or participants if they want to add something or say something.
Anybody? We have a really running short of time. In chat box, so many give the comment, so I will send it to you. Now I invite Professor Jamanul Islam Bhuya, Chairman Scientific Committee, to say vote of the thanks. Vote of thanks, sir, please.
Mr. President and Secretary of the BAUS and speakers from abroad, that is India, and Rajiv TP, Honorary Secretary, and Madhu Agarwal, SARC President, and our panelists and participants. Actually, this is a formal ceremony from the thanks to our Indian partner. I personally think that they are our home partner, and nothing to say thank to them. But as part of the formality, I must say thank from my core of heart to Professor Shabniz and Rajiv TP. They are actually known to me as before, and Professor Ajoy is probably this is the first time I see him. And I must thank from my heart and from my Purkinje fibers of the heart. And the other panelists, I must thank them, and participants without whom all the programs would not be successful. And I think the participants will be immensely benefited from it. And what the Professor Shabniz has told, it is the real time for us, particularly in Bangladesh. We should keep up with this technology and with this surgery future. And I must thank scientific partner Unimed and UniHealth for their contribution as before, and I hope all the contribution from our Indian partner, it will be going on as before now and certainly in future also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your vote of thanks. And I gave to Namaskar to Professor Shabniz sir, Ajay Ashal, and Rajiv TP, and all Indians delegates, Professor Madhu. And finally, I invite our Honorable President of Bangladesh Association of Urological Surgeons, Professor Habibur Rahman, to deliver his speech and conclude the session. And bye-bye, stay safe, Eid Mubarak, see you soon, inshallah.
Thank you, Dr. Dipu. This is a nice session. Actually, Bangladesh Association of Urological Surgeons is determined to deliver and to organize such program like vascular access, and particularly some large workshop it was very useful. I think this sorts of workshop will be very helpful, and we think this program will be we'll repeat this program when pandemic, the COVID pandemic is over. In Bangladesh, in per year, 30 to 40,000 chronic renal failure is adding to the total renal failure patients. So, and only 8 to 10% is getting replacement therapy. So, you think a vast population of Bangladeshi need hemodialysis or transplantation, and hemodialysis is very, very important for any vascular access, the hemodialysis is the best method over all methods. So I think every urologist should practice or have to be practiced near future, because there are so many patients and all the hemodialysis patients are maltreated by some others. And I think if we are trained, if we are confident enough, then we can do this very easily. Hopefully, and I really thanks to Professor Ravindra B. Sabnis and Professor Ajoy Oswal, and also thankful to Dr. Rajiv TP, Honorary General Secretary, Indian Society of Urology, and in future, Bangladesh Association of Urological Surgeon will demonstrate or deliver such program. Lastly, Eid Mubarak to everybody, and I'm thankful to our scientific partner Unimed Health for their cooperation, and thanks to all viewers from home and abroad. In future, we'll meet together. Thank you much. Eid Mubarak.